Hi and welcome back to ScottiesTech.Info. I'm Scotty with my co-host Cletus. So I live in southwestern France, in the middle of farm country, and recently, for reasons which I don't quite fully understand, I got fiber internet. It is super high speed. It's really fast. It's actually 1 gigabit symmetric. There's currently a plan underway where they're replacing all the copper phone lines in the entire country with a brand spanking new fiber network. So I now have ridiculously fast internet, which is fantastic. And but I noticed that when I was talking with people, locals, that even the more techie among them, they were kind of misunderstanding what this actually means. So it turns out that most of them are using Wi-Fi, as most people do these days, and they're using older Wi-Fi, like Wi-Fi 5. Or they're using newer Wi-Fi 6, but they don't really realize that they're not getting the full speed of their connection. And there's a lot of reasons for this. I made a video called Another Reason Not to Use Wi-Fi, which you can watch. That video will explain to you why the advertised speeds of Wi-Fi are not what you actually get in terms of like practical reality. So you buy like a Wi-Fi router and it says like up to 1.9 gigabits per second, but practically you might not see anything faster than like sometimes 150 megabits per second. With newer Wi-Fi 6, you might get 600 or 800 megabits per second if you set everything up correctly, if the stars are aligned and all that kind of stuff. So also, just because you get, say, a fiber internet connection and it comes with Wi-Fi 6 on it, which is supposed to be all super duper, that doesn't mean that your computer is actually going to connect at the faster speeds to the Wi-Fi network. Because the box, the internet router that your ISP gives you, it may support Wi-Fi 6, but in order to get Wi-Fi 6, you have to take your laptop or desktop computer, find out what Wi-Fi card is installed, and then probably upgrade to a Wi-Fi 6 version. In other words, what I'm trying to say is that just because you have a super fast internet connection, if you're using slower Wi-Fi or slower Ethernet, you actually won't get the maximum download speeds that your internet connection can provide. So you're paying for something, but you're not able to take full advantage of it, basically. Okay, great. So the next question on your mind is, well, how do I figure out if my local house network, whether it's Wi-Fi or Ethernet, how do I determine if my local network is actually limiting the speed of my super fast internet connection? Well, it turns out there's a super easy test you can do. So the first thing you're going to do is you're just going to connect your laptop up to Wi-Fi as you normally would. Here on the left you have your ISP's box, the router that they give to you. That's connected with either a fiber or a coaxial cable or whatever to the internet, to your ISP, and of course you have Wi-Fi turned on, you have the Wi-Fi on your laptop enabled, and all you're going to do is just connect to the internet as you normally would, go to SpeedTest.net, and just run a speed test. And that's going to show you a certain download speed and an upload speed. Now, once you've done the Wi-Fi test, the next thing you're going to do is a test with an Ethernet connection connected directly to your ISP's box. And for that, you're going to need a simple Ethernet cable. Now, most likely your ISP gave you your router, your box, as I like to call it, and they included an Ethernet cable with it. So if you find that box, you'll probably already have one. You don't even need to buy one. Now, all you're going to do is you're going to turn off the Wi-Fi on your laptop, and then you're going to connect an Ethernet cable into your laptop or desktop, and then connect the other end to one of the Ethernet ports in the back of your ISP's box, and simply go to speedtest.net and run another speed test. Now, if you see that the Wi-Fi test gives you much lower speeds than the Ethernet test, that is a pretty good indicator that your Wi-Fi is actually slower than your internet connection. And that means that you'll probably want to upgrade your Wi-Fi or use Ethernet instead. Now, in order to upgrade your Wi-Fi, what you could do, if your computer already supports a faster Wi-Fi speed, you'd have to research that. You would simply buy a Wi-Fi router or access point and connect it with an Ethernet cable to one of the Ethernet ports in the back of your ISP's box. Then, instead of connecting via Wi-Fi to the ISP's box, you connect to your fancy new Wi-Fi router or access point. And then you do another speed test. And if that speed test is as fast as Ethernet, well, then you're done. Now, there are a couple of gotchas here because as it turns out, especially in many modern laptops, manufacturers simply assume that everyone uses Wi-Fi. So even in brand new laptops, very often the Ethernet is not gigabit Ethernet, it's only fast Ethernet, which only goes at 100 megabits per second. So you'd have to look this up too, but if you do the Ethernet test and you know your internet connection is much faster than 100 megabits per second, and you're only getting 100 megabits, then most likely that means your computer only has a fast Ethernet adapter. So what do you do then? Well, you dongle it. What you need to do is buy one of these. It's a USB Ethernet dongle. I'll put links to all this stuff down in the description. This one is USB Type A, a normal USB port to Ethernet, and this one is USB Type C to Ethernet. Now the important thing here is that it has to be a USB 3 dongle, because if it's USB 2, it will only be fast Ethernet, because USB 2 is too slow for gigabit Ethernet. Again, you don't really need to worry about it. I will put links to these down in the description, but the point is that if your Ethernet test is very slow, i.e. 100 megabits or lower, chances are you only have a fast Ethernet adapter, and by simply buying one of these dongles and plugging it in and connecting the Ethernet cable to that, boom, you just upgraded your computer to gigabit Ethernet. Then you can redo the tests and you'll get accurate results. Okay, but it gets even more complicated than that, because what if you have an internet connection that's even faster than 1 gigabit per second? This is actually my case because I have not one, but two 1 gigabit symmetric fibers. So the total internet speed that I now have is 2 gigabits down and 2 gigabits up. Now how I do that, well, that's a story for another time. But the point is that if you have internet that's faster than 1 gigabit, let's say you have 2 gigabit per second fiber, then it could actually be that your wired Ethernet network is the limiting factor. Well, why is that? Well, here you can see, there you go, you've got your ISP's box and it's connected to the internet at large with a 2 gigabit per second connection. But even the most modern routers, they don't have anything more than 1 gigabit Ethernet. Which means that, okay, well, if you want maximum speed, what you have to do is actually connect two different computers, each of those with a 1 gigabit Ethernet cable, preferably. You connect each of those computers with an Ethernet cable to the ISP's box. What this means practically is that no one computer is ever going to be able to upload or download faster than 1 gigabit per second. But if you have two different computers, they can both upload or download at the same time at 1 gigabit per second, and then you will saturate your 2 gigabit per second internet connection. And of course the same is true for Wi-Fi. Even if you're using the brand spanking new Wi-Fi 6E, most likely you're not going to be getting the 10 gigabits per second that they claim. You'll probably get maybe a gigabit if you're lucky. Usually I'm seeing like 800 megabits per second, which is obviously way slower than your 2 gigabit Ethernet connection. So if you have super fast internet, you absolutely want to use Ethernet, because then you're not wasting the internet connection that you're paying for. Now, if necessary, what you could do is you could get faster Ethernet switches. Finally, at long last, 2.5 gigabit per second so-called multi-gig Ethernet switches are finally hitting the consumer market. There's this one, it's a TP-Link, it's about $110. It's only 5 ports, but, and of course $110, you can get a gigabit switch with 8 ports for like less than 20 bucks, so these are still very expensive. There's also a TrendNet available that I think is like $125. Those won't be available in some areas until like, I think like later this month. As multi-gig Ethernet switches become more popular, and as more motherboard makers include 2.5 gigabit per second Ethernet on their motherboards, this stuff will become more widely available from more manufacturers, and the price will go down. But if you do have a super mega fast internet connection and you have an Ethernet network in your house, you may want to consider spending some bucks and getting 2.5 gig Ethernet. Note that just as with Wi-Fi though, unless you have a brand spanking new computer, it probably is not going to support 2.5 gig Ethernet, which means you either need to once again use a dongle or get, in the case of a desktop PC, you can buy internal PCI Express cards that are 2.5 gigabits per second. And again, I'll put links down in the description to those. And finally, if you're using Wi-Fi and you would like to switch over to using an Ethernet network in your house because it's just faster and lower latency and faster ping times and it's reliable, then you can watch my video called No More Wi-Fi, How to Wire Your House for Ethernet. It's actually a series of videos, so if you already have a patch panel in your house or a switch, or you have Ethernet jacks in the house already, check the other videos on that playlist. It's a series of videos where I go through all the details of making a simple home network. And if you're thinking like, well, yeah, but what about Wi-Fi 6E? It's super duper, right? Well, yes and no. If you're thinking of using Wi-Fi 6E, I would still recommend using 2.5 gig Ethernet. And for more information on that, you can watch my video here where I compare 2.5G Ethernet with Wi-Fi 6E. Wow, that's a tongue twister. So there you have it. That's how you can test and find out, are you actually wasting your super fast internet connection, or are you getting the full speeds that you're paying for? For more techie tips, see ScottiesTech.Info. Thanks for watching. See you next time.